Welcome to the Herald Democrat Sports Podcast. I'm the sports editor of the Herald Democrat, Jason Del Rosa, and you're listening to the latest edition of the Herald Democrat Sports Podcast. We had two teams alive last week playing right after Thanksgiving. We have two teams still alive playing into the month of December, which is a goal for so many teams. If you make it this far, you're one of 8 teams left in your division, in your classification, and you're playing to make it to the Final Four. We've got two teams doing it. We'll break it down here on the Herald Democrat Sports Podcast, brought to you by Frontier Golf Carts Texoma. Experience the thrill of savings to celebrate their new Denison location, proudly serving the greater Texoma area, where they're launching with the lowest prices of the year. This marks an exciting new chapter in the 11-year history of Frontier Golf Carts as they expand from their original location in Salina. For their grand opening, come see the awesome collection of new carts with up to $1,500 off, including the 2024 Frontier EV Lightning F4 with all seats facing forward. New lithium battery-powered golf carts with backup cameras and touchscreen entertainment start at $7,495. Visit frontiergolfcarts.com or check out their Facebook page for the latest specials. So we are in week 15 of the football season, also known as the region final, also known as the state quarterfinals, depending on how you want to term it. We go with region final because if you have the region semifinals, it only makes sense that you have a region final. So that's what we refer to it here on the podcast, in the paper, with the stories. But obviously, there's only 8 teams left, like I said. So that means it's a quarterfinal round, state quarterfinals, trying to get to the semifinals. And to think we're only 2 weeks away from championship week. It's amazing that this season is flown by. We still have 2 teams competing. They are the same 2 teams that were standing at this point last year and the year before. And so it's no surprise that if we had gone back to the beginning of the season and said, who are the 2 teams that'll be here still alive in December, of course everyone would have said the Gunner Tigers in 3A Division 2 and the Collinsville Pirates. Maybe would have been a surprise because of all the graduation, but they are back for another trip in 2A Division 2 to get to this point as well. So we'll do what we always do. We will work our way down. We'll look at last week. We'll talk about the games going on this week. And they're local, which is exciting for a lot of reasons, especially because of less travel. And it means a lot of people that want to see these games are going to get to go to them. So let's kick it off first with Gunner in their 3A Division 2 Region 2 final matchup. This is 7 o'clock on Thursday down at Melissa. And for those who are wondering, that's Kenny Deal Stadium. That's at the new high school. It's not the old stadium that they've played at up until the last couple years. It's the brand new stadium on the new high school campus. So make sure that's where you go for this game. Gunner against Holiday. 11-2 Gunner after they won last week 44-14 against Jacksboro. Holiday is also 11-2. They won 46-20 against Tolar. And this is a very familiar matchup for fans of the Tigers, fans of people following the playoffs in this area. This will be the 5th time in 7 seasons that they're going to meet here in the region final. They have met 7 times in that span because Gunner and Holiday were in the same district. And in 2 of those years, they ended up meeting again in the region final. But to get here, they both had what we thought were going to be some interesting matchups. I thought that this Final Four had a chance to be competitive. And for Gunner in their game against Jacksboro, again, we talked about how this was the team that pushed Gunner the most last season, had the most offensive firepower against them, forcing Gunner to not just score, but score in the 50s to make it a comfortable win based on what Jacksboro was able to do. This was a comfortable win for Gunner right from the start. with 4 touchdowns in the first 8 minutes, and they were able to cruise to that 44-14 victory. This was a game that was, you don't want to say over at halftime, or even not over after the first quarter, but it's 37-0 at halftime, and Jacksboro got on the board midway through the third quarter, and then Gunner scored again to make it 44-7 before Jacksboro scored again with about 5.5 minutes left in the game. But again, the huge start was the absolute story in this game. Easton Overman opens the game with a 70-yard kickoff return for a touchdown. So after 15 seconds, Gunner's already up, already has Jacksboro on their heels. The third play of Jacksboro's first possession is a fumble that Gunner recovers. Major Thornhill recovers it near the sideline. Gunner then quickly goes in and scores. Mitchell Gage, 24-yard touchdown catch from Preston Tarpley on a screen. Then the first play of the ensuing possession is an interception by Brock Body, and oh no, I'm sorry, I have that backwards. The interception was first by Body, and then the fumble recovery was the second turnover on the third play of that drive, and then Gunner goes in and scores right away. Body finished off that drive with a 1-yard touchdown run, and then Gunner forces a 3-and-out, gets the ball just past midfield, and Colin Peacock 52-yard touchdown catch from Tarpley on the second play of that drive, and boom, just like that, it's 28-0. You've given Jacksboro such a hole. Obviously, it was going to be tough for them to get out of it. They ended up with 4 turnovers to hurt that effort. They were not able to get anything going in the ground game. 25 carries for 28 yards. The overall numbers from the passing game do look decent. Wyatt Gavitt threw for 249 for Jacksboro, but a lot of that was well after the game was decided. And honestly, if you look at the 2 touchdowns that they had, one was for 87 yards, one was for 30 yards. So that's 107 of those yards of the 249 on just those 2 plays. And again, like we said, at that point the game was already 37-0, and it was the middle of the third quarter before Jacksboro was able to get on the board. And so the other 18 passes got 130 yards ish. So that outside of those 2 big plays, not a whole lot going for Jacksboro's offense. And meanwhile, Gunner does what Gunner does, spreading the ball around. Preston Tarpley, 9 of 10 passing for 197 yards and 3 touchdowns. All that came in the first half. Like we said, spreading the ball around from a receiving standpoint, Colin Peacock, 4 catches for 93 yards and his touchdown. Dylan Tokars had 2 catches for 45 yards and a touchdown. He also had 6 carries for 23 yards and a score. We mentioned Brock Body with a touchdown run. He also caught a 27-yard pass. Jay Campiti led the way in rushing, 9 carries for 69 yards. And Tarpley also kicked a 30-yard field goal to account for all of the scoring on the Gunner side. And so it did not go the way I think a lot of people thought it might go. You know, if Gunner was going to win, I thought they win big. I thought they would be able to pull away, but they did a really good job. We talked about coming into the game. Cannon Valenzuela has been an amazing receiver for Jacksboro the last couple of years. He had a huge game last year against Gunner. He's committed to Colorado State. He's a huge target. I think he's 6'4", and they did an amazing job, doubling him, bracketing him, making sure he couldn't get open. He had 2 catches for 2 yards at halftime, when the game was essentially in the balance in the first quarter and beyond. And then he finished with 7 catches for 42 yards on the day, and it was very obvious they were not going to let him beat them, and unfortunately, I think the thing that helped Jacksboro last year was they had such a good balance offensively between the run and the pass that you couldn't load up on either one of them. One of the big names for them last year was Luke Sams at running back. He was coming off the injury. I don't know what percentage you want to give him in terms of coming back from that injury. He only had the one carry the week before. This last game, he only had 3 carries for 5 yards. It looked like he tried to give it a go. It wasn't anything obvious, but to have him not be a big part of their offense, it was obvious that there was something nagging him for, you're a senior. These are your last potential couple games going back to last week against Scurry Rosser. You want to be a part of it. You don't want to have your career end with you just standing on the sideline. So you commend the kid for trying to gut it out, but obviously he was not anywhere near 100% or anywhere near what he was able to do last year against Gunner. And so this turned into a very lopsided game. And then Holiday, they were able to do the same thing. Their score actually looked closer than what it was, the 46-20 score, because this was another game that got off to a really good start for the winning team, and that it was almost, you don't want to say it was almost a carbon copy of what Gunner did, but it was pretty stinking close. And it was a little more dominating because I don't have the exact stat, but it was something along the lines of that Toller didn't have a first down for, I don't know if it was for the whole first half or if it was into the third quarter before they were obviously able to do some stuff once the game got out of hand for Holiday. But again, it was one of those things where you looked at what Bells was able to do against Toller last week or 2 weeks ago, I guess technically, to hold them down offensively was interesting to note, and I thought that they were going to have to try to win another low-scoring game against Holiday, because the one thing that Holiday has shown in these runs recently to the region final is their defense has been really good, and that was again the case here. This was a game that was, like I said, much like Gunner's game. This was 36-0 at halftime. It was 40 or 39-7 after 3 quarters before Toller tacked on a couple of touchdowns in the end to make it a little more interesting. And the big thing about Holiday getting back here, so like we mentioned, it's the 5th time in the 7 seasons that they've played for a region championship. Obviously, Gunners won all of those matchups because this is the 9th straight time Gunners made the region final. Obviously, they're 8-0 in the previous 8 appearances, and they have had their way against Holiday in pretty much all of these matchups. There was one of these games that was, you don't want to say relatively close, but a lot of them have been, very lopsided, which is obviously a testament to what Gunner's been able to do over the years. When they met 2 years ago, last year they did not play. Like I said, Jacksboro was the region finalist opposite Gunner last year, and Jacksboro had to beat Holiday on the way to get to that point. But 2 years ago, when these teams played at the start, it was 31-7. Before that, it was 35-14, and in 2000. So then there was a skip there in 2020 where they did not play, and then in 2019 it was 27-9, and in I guess technically the second meeting in the playoffs in 2018 it was 27-6, and the first meeting in 2017 was 48-7. So just going by those scores, Holiday has not scored more than 14 points against Gunner in these playoff matchups. Gunner has, with the one outlier of that 20-7 game, they've scored at least 4 touchdowns or 27 points in all these games, and for the most part, they've gotten in the 30s on all but one of the most recent occasions. So these games have not been close in the region final. Now, there's been a change in terms of schemes for Holiday on both sides of the ball. They had been more run-based. They were wing T. They were, they were very old school, and it worked. So it wasn't like one of those things like, hey, why are they doing this? It obviously worked. They've had several really good runs in running that offense. And the same thing for their defense. It had been very good. They were, winning district championships. They were going through the regular season with really good records. And if it ain't broke, you don't fix it. You don't mess with it. They had a very good run under Coach Johnson for about a decade. He built the program up to, unfortunately it coincided with Gunner's run starting in 2016, but you look at their record, their records 11-2 starting in 2017, 11-2, 12-2, 10-4, 11-2, 13-1, 13-1, 11-2, and again this year 11-2, in the second year of the coach after a coaching change. So, that's 8 straight years of double-digit wins. And they, like I said, they've been the district champion the last 5. They've done really well. The problem is Gunner has been in their way, and they have to be thinking, okay, well, this is the chance for us to make something happen. They haven't been to the state semifinals since 1996. They could very easily be undefeated. They have 2 losses on the season, and both of them are very close to where you could be sitting here and saying, if you didn't lose to Ben Burke 33-29 and Jim Ned 17-15, we're talking about a team that is, sitting here with an undefeated record. The obvious interesting thing between the matchups is there are 3 common opponents. The Gunner had 2 games against their district. This is the 3rd opponent out of that district that Gunner's playing in the playoffs. There's obviously Jacksboro last week, City View, and now Holiday. And in district play for Gunner, they had Blue Ridge as an opponent. That's who Holiday beat in the area round to get to the region semifinals. And the scores are relatively close. If you want to play that game, Gunner beat Jacksboro, like we said this past week, 44-14. Holiday beat them 36-14. The City View as an opponent, Gunner beat them 45-14. Holiday beat them 41-14. And the one outlier of the 2 was Blue Ridge. Gunner beat them 52-21. Holiday beat them 42-34. And that was a game that Holiday had to have a crazy rally in the final couple minutes, return a fumble for a touchdown. They were down, they were going to lose, and they were able to pull that out 42-34. So if you want to play that game, you can do that as well. Gunners won 10 games in a row since those back-to-back losses. They scored at least 42 points in every single one of those wins. it's going to be interesting to see if Holiday can find a way to slow Gunner down. They have yet to do it in these matchups. Obviously, we don't have the data from last year, which was like I said, the first year under a new head coach with these new schemes, that what it would look like against Gunner. And so maybe that takes the first part of this game for Gunner to kind of figure out, well, this is what it's going to be like against this version of Holiday. But it's obvious that the one thing Gunner has been able to do, not just in district, in the playoffs these last couple of years, if they get off to a fast start, if you give them any sort of advantage or turnover or something where they can turn something into a big play, and you do it and you let them do it early, you're in trouble, and they'll have you playing from behind. It's going to be interesting. I don't know if it's going to look like some of the earlier matchups that were kind of grinded out games. You don't want to throw in weather as a factor, but this is obviously a time of year, and especially we'll talk about it with Connsville's game, because they play on a different night, that you don't know how the wind's going to be. You don't know how how cold it's going to be, or the wind, and if there is a significant wind, what the wind chill is going to look like. Just from looking at these teams, I would say it sort of depends on the opponent, because I think Holiday has been more of a passing. They've gone to more of a passing attack, rather than a running game. So that's obviously going to be something to watch for. If there is winds, if it is cold, you never know how that's going to go. And I also wonder, we're also at that point where with everybody sort of looking as an underdog, if you're playing up that aspect against going against Gunner, does that change your thinking? Are you more aggressive because you're not expected to win these games? All the pressure is on Gunner. You hate to say, unfortunately for them, it's going to be that way until the championship game, if they get that far, because when you're the two-time defending champ, you're the team to beat until somebody beats you. And for Holiday, unfortunately for them, in this matchup, it hasn't happened yet. So do you just tell the kids to go out and play and do what you can, and let's keep it close, and if we keep it close, we've got a chance, and then maybe the pressure's on Gunner because everybody expects them to win? I don't know. But again, this has been a really good program, and Gunner has found a way to be better in this span, and we'll see if that continues. And if it does, Gunner wins the region for the 9th straight year. They're in the semifinals again for the 9th straight year, making the Final Four, and would be 2 wins away from winning a 3rd straight championship. Or does Holiday break through, have their best season since 1996, and who knows what's in store for them? I think they obviously look at it as, we've just been stuck in the region with the best program at the 3A Division II level, basically for the last decade. We got stuck behind them. So unfortunately for them, that's the way it is. But I think it has a chance to be interesting. I think everybody that's left is really good. I saw one coach kind of say, there's only 8 teams left, and even if you want to rank them however they're ranked, if you're the last ranked team, you're still the 8th best team in the state, and your season is where everybody would kill to have you be in that spot. But somebody's got to, there's only going to be 4 teams that advance, and it's going to be interesting to see. Looking ahead to next week, the winner of this game plays the Canadian Wall winner in the semifinals. Obviously, if it is Gunner Canadian, that is something I don't want to say we're all too familiar with, but we obviously are. we would be looking at um, the I hate to say it because it's crazy to think that it would be the eighth time in 9 seasons that Gunner and Canadian would play in the state semifinals. Obviously, Gunner has won the last 2. They've won 3 of the last 4 there. They have never played. They have never played Wall, and that matchup out there intrigues me, because Canadian had a dogfight on its hands last week against Idalou. They only won that game 27-20, and I believe they had to come back to win that game, or it was tied. There was something about that game. I was trying to follow it, with all the other action going on, and it was definitely maybe a lot closer than what people thought that might be. But obviously, either one of the teams that are left are out there are really good, and obviously that's going to be a nice little road trip, to have to deal with that next week, no matter who it is. But Canadian, obviously everybody is familiar with Canadian out there. Wall's one of those teams that they're sort of, if you want to compare the two, Holiday is to Gunner as Wall is to Canadian. Obviously Canadians dominated that district out there, or that region out there, and Wall has sort of been the one to take the brunt of, well, if it wasn't for Canadian, we'd be the team that is making these great runs and all that sort of stuff. So they've just been stuck in dealing with that in Region 1, and so that should be a really good game to see who advances to faces this winner. So we got Gunner Holiday, 3A Division 2 Region 2 final, 7 p.m. on Thursday, down in Melissa. Should be a really good one, and we'll see what happens there. And the other team still alive, as we know, the Collinsville Pirates, Class 2A Division 2 Region 2 final. They are back for the 3rd straight year. Impressive in its own right. They have a district rematch. Munster came out of the other side of the bracket. The district rivals, 8-2A. Showdown from just 5 weeks ago. This one, much bigger stakes. Spot in the state semifinals. This is going to be 7 o'clock on Friday at Denison, out at Munster Stadium. So, again, we have 2 really good matchups, really good records, essentially in Grayson County for one, and almost in Grayson County for the other. You don't have to go very far into Collin County to watch Gunner play. So I think we're going to have some really good crowds. The weather's a little colder from what it looks like for Collinsville Munster on Friday. But again, should be a great matchup. Collinsville comes in at 12-1. They won last week 52-34 against Windthorst, and Munster is 11-2. They won last week 56-14 against Albany. So with Collinsville, much like Gunner, really great start. They had to, I don't want to say withstand some things in the second half because their lead was so big. But again, 21-0 for the Pirates in the first quarter. Very similar start. They go and score first. Garrett Trevino, 21-yard touchdown run right away, establishing we're in the lead, come get it. Chad Davidson comes up with an interception on Windthorst's first possession. Then he catches a 20-yard touchdown from J.J. Jenkins. So it's 14-0. And then Later in the quarter, Trevino again, 47-yard touchdown run. Again, almost carbon copy. Less than 8 minutes into the game, Collins was already up 21-0. They were up 31-0 late in the first half when Windthorst does get on the board. They got a touchdown run right before halftime, but it's 31-8. And then essentially the second half, the teams are just trading touchdowns. Windthorst gets on the board first. Late, about 4 minutes left in the third quarter, so they're down 31-14. But then Collinsville scores, then Windthorst scores again. Then we get to the fourth quarter, Collinsville scores, Windthorst scores. So Collinsville was never really threatened. Obviously, you see the final score, you see 52-34, and you're like, oh, okay, well that's obviously a 3-touchdown margin or 3-score game. But obviously, like we said, it's 31-8 at halftime, and Collinsville was able to ride that big lead, and a very balanced attack for them. They end up having 2 100-yard rushers. They could have had a third if they decided to let Trevino get the ball more, because he had the 2 carries for 68 yards and those 2 touchdowns. Brandon Cantu, 12 carries for 152 yards and 3 touchdowns. Chase Shepard, 10 carries for 106 yards and a touchdown. Jenkins in the passing game, 20 of 30 for 245 with a touchdown and an interception. Chad Davidson, with that touchdown catch, he finished with 4 receptions for 81 yards. Landry Spivey, 4 catches for 61 yards. Jackson Spivey, 2 for 42 yards. And Shepard also added 5 catches for 38 yards for his day there. And I will point out, from a special team standpoint, Isaiah Smith kicked a 41-yard field goal, which it's tough to see that at any level, let alone the 2A level. So that's a real nice effort there by him. And like I said, it was a really good start. They're able to ride it. This was a game we mentioned a couple years ago. Obviously, the pieces on the field are different, but that was a very close game. They both came in with the same records, so I'm sure Windthorst thought, hey, we can hang with these guys. 3 interceptions, 2 of them by Chad Davidson, helped play a factor. And like we said, that Windthorst wasn't really able to get anything going until the second half, and by then it was too late. So Collinsville did its part. They got back to the region final, like I said, for the 3rd straight year. They come in the 3rd straight year at 12-1. So the last 2 years, obviously, they've lost to Albany, who went on to win the state championship both of those years. So Collinsville had finished at 12-2. If they do find a way to break through this year, again, getting to that 13th win, that would set the school record. It would put them in the state semifinals for the second time in program history and the first since 2000. And Collinsville's been doing it, mostly on offense. They have had some good defensive efforts, but in the last 10 games, they've scored at least 50 points 6 times. But the opponent this time is the team that has found the way to beat them. That is the blemish on Collinsville's record. Munster thoroughly defeated the 2-time defending champs in Albany, like we said, by that 56-14 score, and that was a score that didn't look like it was as close as that looked, because that game got out of hand rather quickly. There were a lot of big plays by Munster, especially in the passing game. They've got a quarterback in Kason Carney. He's a dual threat. He had a big game against Collinsville the first time. I'll talk about that here in a second. That when you look at what they were able to do against Albany, Carney throws for 165 yards, and you say, well, that's not a lot, but he was only 5 of 6 passing, so he averaged 33 yards of completion. 2 of them went for touchdowns. He also almost had 100 yards on the ground and getting 2 touchdowns there as well. So they hit those big plays. They got up really big. Albany was not able to run the ball at all. They had to rely on the passing game. It was there were a couple interceptions. The completion percentage was not very good, 18 of 35, for 291 yards, which obviously that's a good number, but like I said, barely 50%. You had the 2 turnovers, and they couldn't really run the ball. And so they got up, 28-7 at halftime. Were able to pull away, and like I said, it was just the barrage of big plays that hurt them. Now, like we said, this is a game that has happened before. We saw this 5 weeks ago for the district, essentially decided the district championship. The winner was going to get the top seed, probably going undefeated in district, which Munster did, and Collinsville was as the losing team was going to get the second seed. They beat everybody else except for Munster, and it was a game that was 34-20. And this was a game that was close. For those who remember back when we talked about it when it happened, this was a game that was tied at 20 after 3 quarters. They they were neck and neck, but going back and forth. It was living up to the hype of, at the time, what was the number 2 team and the number 3 team in the statewide rankings for 2A Division II. And then Munster's able to capitalize on a couple of Collinsville turnovers, which helped them not only take the lead, score twice in that fourth quarter, but also obviously short-circuiting those Collinsville drives to have them have a chance to, maybe had taken the lead at 27-20 or been able to tie the game at 27 and then see what happens down the stretch in that game. So it's interesting because they've already played, and you have a team that won, you win by 14, that's comfortable. That it wasn't a blowout. It wasn't what these teams have done to a lot of other people this season. And I think that might be the biggest thing, is that you can look at that final score and you can say, 34-20, that's comfortable, that's not close. But again, 20-20 after 3 quarters, 12 minutes to go, and you're on even footing with your opponent. If this had been 56-14, if this had been a game where Collinsville had not done anything offensively and lost big, or if it had been the other way around, if Collinsville had won this game 56-14, I think it changes the approach for everybody, because the domination of one side would lead you to think, well, that's going to happen again. We just played barely a month ago. What has changed since then that would lead you to think that it's going to flip? Now, does that happen? Yes. Does the team that won the district game lose the rematch? Yes, that happens. I don't say all the time, but it does happen. And I think the fact that it was close leads you to think that it's going to be close again, at least for a significant portion of this game. Now, the approach is going to be from both sides, and I think this is always the most fascinating thing when you have these rematches of, well, do we do exactly the same thing? Because for 3 quarters it worked, or like I said, it had us tied. Does the opposing team say, well, we know that they're going to do this because it worked, so now we've got to totally go against our tendencies and go against our initial game plan, because that's exactly what the blueprint for them to try to stop it is there, because they know what worked for them last time and what didn't work, and vice versa. So that's always interesting. A lot of people would say you do what you do, and you don't worry about the fact that you've already played the game or whatever. I think obviously whoever won last time, um, if this rematch did happen, and I think a lot of people thought it would happen, that the pressure's on that team. So obviously coming into this one, the pressure is on Munster. They won last time, so what you should win again. You've shown that you can, make the plays there to win by a couple touchdowns. And so, again, how does that affect the mindset of these teams? Because I think if you go back 5 weeks, yes, you want to win every game that you want to play. Yes, you want to win a district title. For Collinsville, they hadn't lost in district play. They were trying to go for a third straight undefeated district title, all that stuff. But in the aftermath of it, no matter who had won, again, I think both sides said, okay, well, we'll see you again in 5 weeks. We will see you again in the region final. And no one is going to care who won the district title 5 weeks ago. They're going to care about getting to the state semifinals. Munster has not been there since 2017 when they had an undefeated championship season. You have a Munster team that is in the region final, just getting to this point for the first time since 2020. They have their most wins in a season since 2015. So they're doing a lot of stuff for a program like Munster that has been very good for a very long time. They're doing some stuff that they haven't done in a while. And again, you have a Collinsville team that is here for the third straight time, trying to break through, make history in a couple ways, and I think they knew that this rematch was on course. Obviously, the only benefit, and obviously you could say it wasn't a benefit, because if you won the district championship the way things worked out, you had to face Albany before getting to the region final. But I think both these teams knew that this was the collision course for a rematch, and I think they both understand that the first game, while it meant a district title, while it meant the top seed, all this other stuff, that was a quote unquote dress rehearsal for the one that everybody really wants to win. Because if you asked them which one would you want to win, the last one or this one, of course you want to win this one. You want to be in the Final Four. You want to be playing to get to AT&T Stadium and play for a championship, which is something Collinsville has never done. They have never been to the championship game. When they made it in 2000, they lost in the state semifinals. So they just won a baseball title. They want to have a football title too. And again, it's I think, to me, that's the biggest thing I'm looking at, is how do these teams who played so recently, what do you alter? What do you think you need to change? How do you deal with the fact that it's somebody who knows what you're going to do and has an idea of how to stop it better than anybody that you're probably going to face? The last time they played, Munster won the turnover battle 3-0. Like we said, the 2 in the fourth quarter, significant to the outcome. If the turnover battle is equal, if there are no turnovers, how does that change this game? Obviously penalties at crucial situations can kill a drive, can extend a drive. Those can be game changing as well. And so this has a chance to be just as good as it was the last time, to be tied, to be to be back and forth, to have two teams that have been considered pretty equal the whole way through have a chance to get to the Final Four and play in the semifinal game. The winner is going to play the Ropes Groover winner in the state semifinals. I cannot tell you a whole lot about either one of those schools. I have a much better handle on Canadian and Wall as future opponents than I do of Ropes and Groover. I do know, much like if, depending on Gunner's opponent, that it's probably going to be a pretty decent drive for whoever wins. Obviously, with Munster and Collinsville being situated as close as they are, being in the same district, you're probably looking at a fun drive to Abilene, depending on who the winner is on that side. Ropes is 12-1. Groover is 13-0. So again, everybody, like I said, everybody at this point is really good. If you look at the final 8 teams that are left in 2A Division 2, there's Groover's the only undefeated team. The worst record is 2 teams are 10-3. So you've got a 13-0, you've got 3 12-1s, you've got 2 11-2s, and you've got 2 10-3s. It's one of those deals where everybody at this point is really good. So I don't know who the favorite. I guess Groover is the favorite there just because they are the last undefeated team at 13-0. And that's a game that game is at 7:00 on Friday. So that'll be going on the same time. So we'll have to wait until both games obviously end to see who is playing who. I didn't mention with Gunner and Holiday, they're the only one playing on Thursday. So the other three games in 3A Division 2 are all on Friday, and they'll have to wait and see who they end up playing after Friday night to try to hammer out details and where they're going to play and all that sort of stuff. So, but again, Collinsville Munster, I think like I said, Collinsville was getting a rematch no matter what. If Albany had won, obviously the storyline there was going to be, here's the team that's already knocked you out the 2 years in a row at this point. They had some graduation things. They had some graduation hurt them. Obviously, Collinsville had the graduation hurt them. Just to get to this point for Collinsville, I think is amazing in itself to have essentially the same record that it's had in the last 2 years. This was a group in getting ready to do the preview on this game for the paper. You talk about reloading and rebuilding and all those sorts of things. When we talk about Collinsville from last year, especially on the offense, because it was so high flying, it was so unstoppable to the point that there were very few people that could slow them down. Collinsville came into this season, they had to replace a quarterback setting records, one of the most accomplished quarterbacks from a statistical standpoint, regardless of classification, but especially at the 2A level. It lost its top 3 rushers. It lost the top 6 guys in receiving yards. It lost 5 of the top 9 tacklers on defense from 2 teams that went 12-2 back-to-back, making the region final. They lost all that, and they plugged in the guys that they did, and the next man up, hey, now's my chance to start. I've been sitting behind somebody for a year or two, and it's like it didn't skip a beat. Again, 12-1 coming in. It's either going to be 13-1 or 12-2, which was the record of the last couple of years. And I don't know how many people before the season would have believed that this was we've talked about it all season with them. They started winning. They didn't stop until they got to I guess what was that have been 8-0 before losing to Munster, and then they bounced back from that, and they've had blowouts ever since. Almost none of their games have been close. Like I said, they've been getting into the 50s for point totals more than half the time in the last 10 games, and it's been, no matter what happens, I think, like I said, a lot of people definitely would have said, they just lost too much, and that's what a good core group comes through, does what that group did. They suffered through their sophomore year together, didn't make the playoffs, and they were able to stay together and put together 2 great seasons. And that's obviously the sign of a good program, to where the standard didn't change. We plugged in a new quarterback. Granted, it was from the same family, but we plug in a guy there, and we have this guy help out on this side of the ball occasionally, and we have this guy step up over here, and we have these young guys at the high school level for the first time contributing over here, and you put it all together, and we're back in the region final. So, like I said, a credit to them to get to this point, and we'll see what happens. It's really hard to predict stuff at this time of year, just because, again, everybody's really good, everybody has amazing records, and I think at the very least, in this case for Collinsville, you just want it to be close. Keep it close. Let them feel the pressure. Let them get caught up in, man, we were supposed to beat these guys again, and now it's tied, or we're trailing by a touchdown. How are we got to find a way to make this happen. And then that's when mistakes happen. That's when you can take advantage, and we'll see what happens. But again, so Collinsville Munster, the rematch in the 2A Division II Region 2 final, 7 p.m. on Friday at Denison, over at Munson Stadium. I think that's going to get a really good crowd. I think Gunner's going to get a really good crowd. It's two really good matchups, well within a short drive to be able to get to those. And like I said, hopefully the weather's not too bad. It does kind of suck that we've had some pretty good weather for the most part, and it looks like, again, Friday's going to be Friday specifically maybe one of those super cold games. You never know how that's going to affect things. It's just dependent, I guess, on like I said, if there is wind, and then you talk about wind chills and all that sort of stuff, for how cold it's going to get. But again, it's exciting. It's the time of year that everybody loves. Like I said, where you start looking to see about who you could play in the Final Four, who's still alive for a championship, who's having the best season in forever, what defending champions are still alive. Obviously, outside of Gunner, there's some really big matchups for defending champions. There's already been a couple champions that didn't even make it past the third round. Some of them didn't get past the second round. So we're getting down to the end, and we're seeing the best of the best. And I think a lot of these matchups are going to be good, and I think these 2 Texoma matchups are part of that for sure. So again, you're not going very far, but be safe, and enjoy, especially if it's your team that you're still playing, and that you're halfway to a championship. You've got 3 wins in the bank. You need 3 more, and come this weekend, we'll see if one or both of these teams are a step closer to making that happen. So again, thank you for listening to the podcast. Follow us on social media. You can follow me on Twitter /X at Jason De La Rosa. follow our Facebook pages. We have a Herald Democrat Facebook page. We have the All-Texomaland Facebook page. If you just want high school sports and not mixed in with all the other news of Grayson County, which I suggest you pay attention to because there's a lot going on as we approach the end of the new year, as we approach the end of this year and get ready for a new year. But if you want All-Texomaland, follow us there. We got basketball getting in full swing. Hopefully football lasts a couple more weeks, but soccer practices are underway for Sherman and Denison. They'll be kicking off at the end of the month with their seasons, and then baseball and softball right around the corner as well. It's always overlapping. There's always something going on, and you can follow us, like I said, at Jason Del Rosa on Twitter /X, and follow the Facebook pages Herald Democrat and All-Texomaland to keep up with everything going on in Grayson County when it comes to your high school sports. So thanks for listening to the podcast, and we will talk to you next week as we recap Week 15 and we see if anybody is in the state semifinals. Thanks for listening. So that's it for here at the podcast. Hope you have a happy Thanksgiving. Hope you have safe travels, whether you're going somewhere to spend the day with family or whether you're traveling to go to one of these games or any game, because there's plenty of great games in the area. Whether there's a couple down 75. People playing at some of these local stadiums, playing in Melissa, playing in Prosper, playing within a reasonable driving distance. If you just love high school football, you want to see some great matchups. There's a lot to go see. So, but if you're going to Gunner, if you're going up Collinsville, these early afternoon games, please be safe. Buckle up with the weather because it looks like it's gonna be cold. So be prepared for that. And no matter what happens, we will talk about it here next week on the Herald Democrat Sports Podcast.